Hello, everybody. It's great to see all of you here today. Welcome to your Nature Journal Educators Forum with your hosts, John Muirlaws, that's me, and the amazing, the mighty, the wise, Ivea Moore, the mad botanist herself. Hey there, Ivea. Great to see you today. So today what we wanted to do is, this was a topic that was suggested last week, and we thought it would be a good one, a really interesting one, to talk about recognizing and identifying student vulnerabilities, and so that we may sort of be able to identify and better deal with students who might need special care when they're working with us as Nature Journal educators. And we also thought we might extend this to identifying if it's not just like somebody who might have a vulnerability about nature journaling, but we thought, why don't we tag into this the idea of identifying students in crisis? And so the more sort of tools we have in our toolkit to kind of help us deal with that, the better off we are. Before we do, Avea, could you let us know some of the shenanigans that are going on in the wide world of nature journaling? Should you want to connect with some of these nature journaling people and have fun with them? There's a lot of cool stuff going on. What's happening?
So, and with that, I pass the floor back to Jack, and thank you.
Thank you, Avea. Oh, boy, it's really fun to see how much stuff there is popping up in this community. And I also just sort of want to say that the idea of the educator workshops through the Wild Wonder Foundation. Wild Wonder Foundation is not saying that we are the boss of nature journaling and we know the one way you should teach things. But what we want to do is to share a bunch of the ideas that educators all over the globe have had and have shared with us, things that seem to be working, and also to create a kind of an open forum for people who are innovating other new ideas to share those with the rest of us, so that collectively we can all kind of take advantage of each other's wisdom and insight and become better educators. So let's talk about student vulnerability. And what I want to maybe do is I want to kind of just throw some ideas at you, and then we're going to do a little bit of free writing, and then we're going to drop into some breakout rooms and have discussions. Then we're going to come back here and we're going to discuss that all with each other. But so things that I just want to kind of seed some ideas, and let's see if there's anybody else who's kind of got any sort of seeding idea things before we kind of do our, I think that'll probably set us up to do free writing, right? So one thing I think is useful to think about is that what is our goal of why we're doing nature journaling? What is the big why behind it? And for me, it's not to create a journal that is a really good journal. It's not to create something that, it's not about this. This is a tool that is in service of this longer aim of how can we get ourselves to pay deeper attention to the world, to be more present while we are here and alive. And how can I pay more attention in the moment? How can I remember that more vividly? How can I do more with my ideas? And things that I do here that are helpful in that, let's do more of that. Things that kind of block me or get me stuck, less of that. And that landscape is going to look really different for each student. We talk about this idea, we've got words and pictures and numbers. And some kids like me are have more trepidation about writing. Being dyslexic, when I would make all my spelling mistakes, I'd get really nervous. And I thought anytime I wrote something down on paper, that was going to come back to me, often in a very kind of judging way, and a very kind of looking at the lowest, sort of the shallowest aspects of whatever I had written. So I'd write something down on paper and it would come back with my spelling corrected and no real engagement with my ideas. And so I became fearful of writing things down on paper. The red pen didn't attack when I drew a picture, but other people, their writing, their drawing is going to be a vulnerability for them. And for other people, maybe those issues come up around using numbers. So I want to think of how to be sensitive to that, how to help people get the most out of what they're doing with this, how to not turn the journal into a fetish or some place where the student feels judged and shut down. And with that in mind, I want to invite everybody to think about yourself and think about your own vulnerabilities in terms of doing nature journaling. And then think about that more broadly to the students that we're working with. How might that give us insight about them? I want to invite everybody to we're going to take maybe about 6 minutes here, and just to get a piece of a blank piece of paper and to write out your thoughts and ideas. Again, the topic is the big topic is student vulnerabilities in nature journaling. We'll talk about sort of students in crisis after that, but student vulnerabilities specifically around nature journaling. And think about identifying it, think about mitigating those things, thinking about things that would be more triggering for people, and how I can design an experience that is going to best help students grow. Let's take 6 minutes now and write and see where that takes our ideas. As you do this, I want to invite you to notice what ideas come really easily. Often when we kind of do this in a process, there's a sort of an initial kind of cascade of ideas, and then our brains kind of get this feeling of like, and scene, like you get this feeling of I'm done. So notice when that comes up. Very often that's when you can then take a look at that list, and the challenge is to see if you can find the thing behind the thing. See if you can take any of your ideas or thoughts a little bit deeper. And knowing that that possibility is out there, see what happens when you go looking for it, right? So let's just do a little bit of writing here. We're going to take 6. All right, in just a moment, we're going to bounce over to some breakout rooms. And what we're going to be doing in these breakout rooms is to sharing what ideas came to you. And you're going to find that different people in your group probably took this in different directions. That some people may be focusing on what might be students' vulnerabilities. Other people would be kind of looking on ways of sort of helping, how do I help students identify those? How do I identify students So we're going to sort of see how people approach this in your group. You'll be with about 3 other people. And something that we found is that people in this group like to talk to each other and like to hang out and chat. So we're going to give you a bonus 2 minutes at the start of the meeting. And the purpose of those bonus 2 minutes is just to kind of say hi and kind of snuggle in there. And you can chit chat about whatever is on your mind. But then somebody's got to be the heavy and say like, all right, so what do you guys think about student vulnerability? Kind of bring the group back around to that. And but we're going to throw in a little bit of time at the start just for you to say hello. Want to encourage people to kind of get to know other people in this community. And something that helps is if we are actually paying attention to each other's names, then when you sort of share an idea, if you're thinking about something like, I can say, Star said this thing that kind of got me thinking about this. So also kind of reference each other. The more that we kind of have can draw threads between our ideas, others' ideas, and create a network there. I think that is useful in our thinking about how we think and how we communicate with each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a 15-minute breakout room with a bonus 2-minute chats at the start, which means that I call that at 12:47. I'm going to be calling people back in here. And want to remind people in this community, we are kind to each other. We are respectful of each other. We want to acknowledge each other's ideas, really listen. If somebody's got a different perspective than you do, that's a really great opportunity to learn about something. People who disagree with you aren't our enemies. People who disagree with us are bodhisattvas that help us learn and grow. But above all, we're going to treat everybody with dignity, with kindness, with respect. And I hope you have a really enjoyable conversation. Hey, everybody, and we are back. I hope that conversation was useful, fun, and what we'd like to do now is we're going to sort of share out anything so it's not like doing a book report. Like in my group, we talked about, and then you do a list of those things. So I really want to know what you just talked about, though, what right now is really standing out to you as this is significant. This is important. Take a look down at the notes you took during that meeting and put a star next to those little thoughts, a few of those. And then we're going to have a bunch of people sharing out things that they just thought were like, oh, this is really rich. I really like this. Here's a crazy topic, or this is a really good point that Sandra made, or whatever it is you kind of what's kind of burning your brain right now. And who wants to sort of set off this cascade? All right. Jen. Oops. I'm going to try this again. There we go. Jen, thank you for being with us.
Thanks. We talked about a lot of things, but what I have a little sparkle bubble circle around is just a sharing circle at the end for both the people I talked to. Seemed to really help. Like we talked about how everybody sort of has some vulnerabilities that they're dealing with, but getting to witness other people's solutions and then maybe giving them positive feedback for things that they themselves hadn't, felt real proud about, or really just like kind of witnessing each other's vulnerabilities and realizing that everybody feels vulnerable and everybody's kind of going out on a limb a little bit really helps just create like a culture or an environment where we're acknowledging vulnerabilities and saying that's part of the process.
That's huge. I think that a lot of us tend to think of like people who are doing well in some part of things as that sort of these super people that also aren't struggling and challenged by their own vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
But
maybe
sorry, what?
maybe the point isn't to like fix our vulnerabilities or get rid of them, but just to not acknowledge that everybody has them. It's part of it.
Right. If we can be in the room with that, then
Yeah.
a lot of its power to shut us down goes away. Oh, it's a vulnerability that I have. It's like, yeah, I'm challenged by the thought of writing things down and using words, and that's why I'm writing things down and use words, right? And also, if we as adults or we as leaders in this group are role modeling that, I think that that's really powerful too. So that if they can then see us taking that same risk. Thank you for that thought. Let's bring in Eleni the Doodler to extend these thoughts. You can unmute and
Greetings. Thank
hello
you.
there.
What a great conversation we had. And just to build on what we're talking about, I think in making a few notes for myself, I realized that unless I acknowledge my own vulnerabilities as a student and as a teacher, if I'm not explicit about that, then I run the risk of projecting them onto the students. So if I don't know what's going on with me, it's still going to be within me. And then I'm just going to see it everywhere. It's like, oh, I don't feel competent doing X, but I'm not aware that I have that feeling. Then I'm going to say, oh, that person isn't confident doing X. It just becomes this smoke and mirrors. So it really behooves me as a teacher and as a learner. I would say, I would even rephrase it. What are my strengths? What are my strengths as a teacher? And where are my growth points? Where can I go a little bit outside of my comfort zone? Because I kind of feel vulnerable with my strengths too, to be honest, because if I do, haven't we all had the experience of like, wow, that class that I just facilitated, that rocked. Oh my God, that was fantastic. And then the next class, it's like, how can I possibly do that again? So strengths can lead to other kind of vulnerabilities. And yeah, so those are a couple of thoughts from that came out from this very rich conversation.
Yeah, I like what you're thinking about there is when we put the vulnerability into the context of a growth mindset, all the vulnerability is being able to identify your growth edge.
Exactly. Because vulnerability sounds like negative.
Yeah.
And it's really positive. It's so positive. Like in a human relationship, when someone feels a little vulnerable, there's a kind of tenderness. Tenderness comes out with that. And then tenderness really requires trust. And yeah, a little bit of love too. So you're not going to just show up the first day of class and like be all vulnerable. There's a process involved.
I really like that idea. And also it makes me think about, in those vulnerabilities, those are the place that we are kind of less tough. We're more human in that space. And if our students are able to see that in us, it gives them permission to do the same.
Yeah, it gives them strength, gives them a model, encouragement.
I like
but
that.
You don't do it the first day. You don't do it the very first day because,
Second day?
Well, check it out.
Okay.
Because you don't want to undermine the student's confidence in you. If you show vulnerability too fast, it's like then, students get nervous, like, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing, that sort of thing.
I think we want to have confidence in the person who is leading us.
Yes.
And then we say like, oh, you've got something to share with me. But then if that person ends up on a pedestal, then they are not like me and I cannot learn from their example. So you're saying that perhaps we should, you know, once you have once people are sort of thinking like, oh, I really can learn something from this, then it's even more impactful to say, this is a big weakness that I have, and gives them permission to have theirs as well. Am I understanding
Yeah.
right?
It's like any relationship. You don't like you're going on a date. I don't know. I haven't gone on a date in 50 years, but you know, you don't want to scare someone the first time you're sitting down to a cup of coffee. They'll run the other way. So you have to, it's like a relationship. You have to see, you know, are these students, I work with adults mostly, but also younger people, you know, can they, what's the energy like to take certain kind of information and then feel your way through it, trusting yourself.
Interesting. This is fun. Let's bring Laramie in on this. And what is this? So we've got these ideas of sort of vulnerability as and sort of reframing that in terms of our growth edge, showing our vulnerabilities to our students as something that shows them that we too are in this learning process, and the importance of being able to see being aware of our own vulnerabilities, and that's okay. Where does this take your thoughts?
Very similar, like in a similar vein, which is that sometimes sharing vulnerabilities can allow someone else in the group to reveal their strength and help you. And I think that's really important. I'll just, like a basic example is just in subject knowledge, right? So I'm a botanist, but I'm not an entomologist. And I think, you know, my vulnerability in a very artificial sense is like, oh, I don't know much about bugs and I don't know much about rocks or this. And I found that that's actually a really fun thing to bring up in group meetings and things like that, where, you know, I'm like, oh, I don't have proficiency or I'm struggling with this. And more times than not, there's someone in there that has that and they can complement mine and uplift me. So that's kind of the thing that got me thinking of like sometimes sharing vulnerability or at least identifying them within ourselves as educators, but also among the people we help can create a more cohesive and uplifting community. So it has to be done carefully, of course, but that's just an example.
So then the student who knows like you don't know bugs, I totally know bugs. They get to shine, and you're showing that you're also demonstrating what you do when you have a growth edge. You're leaning into it instead of hiding from it. And so you're demonstrating a growth mindset there, and also demonstrating asking for help, and then allowing somebody else to step into the spotlight of you're dealing with your vulnerability by letting somebody else highlight their strengths. Just, yeah, in the context of a growth mindset, this is gold. I love this, thinking about this dance between how can I let somebody else sort of show their strengths in a way that's going to help me, but also them being able to show their strengths in your area of vulnerability gives them ideas that it's then okay for them to have their own area of vulnerability as well.
Yeah, and it kind of opens people up a little bit more.
Yeah, that part of growth mindset where they talk about Like if you've got a fixed mindset, other people who have skills at things are a threat.
Yeah.
As opposed to other people are going to give me just this richness and insight. Ooh, I
Yeah,
like this. I
and
like this.
it's
Yes.
oh, so sorry. And it's so beautiful because like there are so many ways to see, you know, an object, and my strengths might help me see that, oh, a longleaf pine cone. Um, my strengths might allow me to see something like, you know, I don't know where the seeds are, and the fact that they're exposed and they don't have ovules, but like someone who has a mechanical engineering degree that's very common in our town might be like, well, how does the water affect the opening and closing of these, and might get really into that. And it allows me, my vulnerability allows me then to subsequently learn from someone else and see the thing from a more, I guess, holistic perspective that I perhaps would not have approached it as, given my limitations or my lack of understanding about something.
And
And
you know,
I've
one of the ideas that comes across in the thinking principles from the International Baccalaureate School is regularly checking in with what are other points of view on this. So you're asking for what is the engineer's perspective on this cone. I like that. I like that a lot. So where does anybody else have thoughts that they want to bring in to this? We've got this idea of dealing with acknowledging yourself as somebody who's got something to bring to the table, but you also have these vulnerabilities, using those vulnerabilities as a space to let other people shine, to let our students sort of see collaboration, to be able to see in you growth. I think that kind of role model of how you handle your vulnerability is really useful. Let's bring Heidi in on the conversation as well. Heidi, what is cooking today?
I'm in my sugar shack. I'm boiling maple sap right now while listening in on this conversation.
Wait, so you are making maple syrup?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is what is
So,
boiling behind you.
Yeah. So that's the evaporator. Yeah.
Those are massive vats of maple syrup there. So those will boil down into how much?
So they say 40 gallons of sap will make 1 gallon of syrup. It actually is more like 50 gallons. Yeah. So I've been at this since 9 o'clock this morning. And I don't have syrup yet, but soon, hopefully.
So out of those vats behind you, you're going to get a pint, and
yeah, hopefully a gallon by the end of the day.
wow, that's really cool. That's cool. And how will you, when you go back to the trees to get more sap, how much will you get? Will you be able to recollect that same amount tomorrow, or has that been stuff that has been sitting around collecting for days?
I'll get another 40 gallons today.
All right.
And we're just small backyard. Like I don't do this professionally.
That's, I mean, how, also just, I know that this is off topic, but I'm
okay.
currently just standing in awe of trees. What you're looking at there. Put the camera on them again. Yeah.
So that's evaporator. It's 3 chambers.
And so
the sap comes in over here, and then as it gets denser, it goes down and around and this way, and then it will come out on this end as syrup.
Oh, this is cool. But
Yeah.
I want everybody to sort of pause for a moment and think of this as what she is collecting there is atmospheric carbon. So here's a weird way to think about this. So what everybody thinks of, like, this is capturing sunlight. No, what you're doing is you're capturing
Sugar.
the sugars there. This was atmospheric carbon that
Yep.
then has been collected by the tree in the presence of sunlight, uses it to kind of hold on to this and turn it into this carbon. And the carbon from the atmosphere, so it then is what you're turning into your syrup. You're making this syrup made out of carbon dioxide that was in the air. And then when you ingest it and you break that carbon apart, you're releasing the energy that is sunlight energy that has been trapped in that carbon. So there's just a whole crazy thing going on there. That's beautiful.
Just another side to extend this side conversation, but I teach biology, high school biology, and this is the phenomenon that I use to teach carbon cycle. And then I will bring in my maple to share with them at the end.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, I think that the more of us that if we can teach carbon cycling with a pancake breakfast, life's just better.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do.
That's
Yep.
That's cool. Now I know that this is has been a big sidecar here, but what are your thoughts?
I am trying to remember now. But
Or did you want me to remind you sort of where we were in the conversation?
I remember. So one of the other things we talked about was sort of when people have these vulnerabilities or areas where they feel are their weakness, I try to encourage them to start with their strengths, right? So when we think about the words, pictures, numbers, maybe pictures aren't your strength. So you're going to start with words and numbers, or, maybe pictures are your strength and you start there. And so I always try to encourage them to start with their strengths and then push themselves out of their comfort level to reach those other pieces, or even dive in deeper into their strengths, because one of the things that we talked about is I think Jen mentioned, like, students wanting to finish early and feel like I checked off the things and so I'm done now, and so allowing them to start with their strengths and then push them to dive into vulnerability after they've done their comfort level.
I think that's a really safe way of kind of approaching it, to kind of help people sort of, because then you always have that kind of reservoir of your competency. Something that human beings are really afraid of is the things that we're not competent about yet. So sort of helping kind of recognize those strengths on the journal page. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
And that could be pulling something from the writing. That could be in noticing a subtlety of an observation that they made. Sort of, that there's a strength in the writing. There's a strength in how they're observing things. I think that especially for people who feel insecure about drawing, sort of noticing that there are many, they are already coming to nature journaling with a really competent set of tools, and they're developing these others.
Yeah.
That's really useful. How cool to be in the sugar shack.
It's hot in here.
Oh man, that's very cool. Does so where does this take your brain? Is
Are you talking to all of us or?
no, yeah, that was just, yeah, throwing that question out. No, it was specifically on you, Larry. No, no, that was an open question to everybody in the room. I guess for me, when I start thinking about my vulnerabilities, a big part of that kind of ties into things where where things where I feel I'm being judged, right? Judged by others, judged by myself. Comparison is an interesting thing that brings up this sort of judgment in ourselves. And very often in our journaling, we will have opportunities where we can see our journal page and other people's journal pages. It was mentioned earlier that how that can, when you can see that there are so many different ways to go about this, that can be motivating, but also it can trigger our insecurities when, if we start saying like, oh, that person is better at whatever this is, oh my gosh, you can do calligraphy, right? And so sometimes the comparison, when we're able to look at other people's things, it kind of gets us into this comparison space as well. So that is, I think that as we are sharing our stuff, something to be aware of. I find it incredibly useful to look at other people's stuff. But what we want to be aware of is that people will often cluster around the one that's a pretty picture. And then that person feels like, right. And they're all happy and they're doing their dance. But that cluster is also sending a message to other people that we're not giving attention to these other things. So the other day we were talking about feedback. That is such an important skill set, because you want to be able to pick up anybody's page and kind of going, look at the genius here. Look at the genius that is in this way of seeing. And be able to reflect that back. Let's bring Sarah into the conversation.
Hi. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear. We hear you.
Way. Um, yeah, I just wanted to mention, I'm not sure how relevant this will be really, but so coming from working in care, a lot of people that I work with are vulnerable, and one of the main things people are lacking is choice. If you're a vulnerable person, you have a lot of choices removed from you. So offering choice in a class could be really important. It could help people to feel safe and to feel comfortable starting out somewhere with their strengths, which I think is what Heidi was saying as well. But also as the facilitator, it gives us clues as to what our students' vulnerabilities might be, because we're seeing what they're not choosing. And we can use that information to help us move forward. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. So let me just repeat back. So because this is a really interesting idea for me, a useful kind of general idea, that when you are dealing with people who are in a vulnerable situation, the more that you can give them choice, give them agency and ability to make their own decisions, the better things go. An example of that might be how you would approach a journaling project, or what you would be doing, the more, so that it allows them to kind of lean into a strength. If I get too prescriptive and we're doing this one this way today, for that person with greater vulnerabilities, that is a much riskier situation. Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. I don't want to, obviously wouldn't ever share kind of particular scenarios that I've come up against. But for example, if you're working with people that perhaps live in a residential centre, they probably have set meal times. They probably don't get to choose what they eat that often. They probably don't get to choose what they wear that often. They probably don't get to choose their activities that often. So choice is really important in that setting. But then all the way at the other end of the spectrum, perhaps you're a single mum and you're really busy and you have to get the children to school and then you have to do your thing and then you have to get them home and get them fed, and you have actually a lot of different things going on. You have a lot of pressures and you don't have a lot of choice as to exactly what you do with your time. And any little bit of choice and agency, I think, can be really, really powerful when you're feeling like you don't have a lot of power in your life. And from experience, I think that can really bloom into allowing somebody to feel like they have more control and more power when they're in a powerless situation. It also allows people to choose. We don't necessarily know our students' backgrounds or all the different things that they might have gone through in order to just get to the class. Some people might have had a great time getting to the class, but some people might have had to get through all kinds of things to get to this point in their life where they're in your class. And you don't want to offer them something that is going to make them feel unwell or unsafe. Without going into too much detail, for example, if somebody came to a class and was really happy doing one thing, but if they were forced to journal about food and they had an eating disorder, that could be really bad.
Right.
Right. If there's all kind of things that because we're not living their experience, we can't foresee. But if you're offering a choice, then you're giving them that option. And you're able to see as the facilitator, what are they feeling comfortable with? What are they not feeling comfortable with? And as you get to know them, then hopefully you can wiggle, for want of a better word, and you get to see, and as well, I think I loved what Lamry was saying about getting to see what other people in the class are doing and them saying, hey, I love bugs, and oh, but I don't know anything about bugs, but I love plants. You get to see them react with each other. And I think sometimes that's where I've had the biggest breakthroughs, is when I'm not necessarily learning from a teacher, but I'm learning from people that are learning too. So offering choice kind of helps with that, because it gives them more diversity within the class. Like, oh, I'm working on bugs, I'm working on plants. Let's like compare in that way, rather than a direct comparison of, I wrote poetry, I can't spell.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does just make sense. What I'm seeing here is a larger concept that has broad applications over all sorts of lessons and interactions with people and students and children. Is just sort of makes me think of the difference of like if I've got one way and I'm being really prescriptive on how to do something, like, hold on, I've got a cramp in my leg. I'm gonna be awkward here for a minute and be standing here talking to you while stretching my leg. I'm so sorry about that. But this idea of giving choice and flexibility to our students is going to allow us to avoid triggers that might sort of send somebody into a spiral. Allows people to play to their strengths. And then I've heard the concept of challenge by choice used. I think it's a useful concept. And what you want to do is to then how I'm going to write this down. I like this idea. How can you make the environment of accepting challenge safe and something that you want to do? So create an environment that is safe for challenge. I'm going to put kind of a big thought bubble around that one. Ooh, let's see. Bam. I love I love these Nature Journal Educator Forum mic drops. There's like they're just there are these really useful ideas that we get. And that, like, you know, there's so much stuff that I hear, like once it's out of somebody's mouth, I like that must be my thought too, because it makes so much sense. It just kind of fits into things so well. But without you articulating it and sharing it, that really kind of I feel like a whole bunch of different ideas kind of crystallizing in my head right now around that concept of the power of choice.
Ooh.
Ooh, this is feeling good. So who wants in on this? Like, so where does this idea then take us, right? What can we do with this? Like, let's bring Marcia in on this and like mix things up further. Like, isn't this cool?
Yes, and I actually usually have more than one project going in my class and let them start with whichever one they want. Maybe not the first few weeks, if like of a semester, but then I will introduce 2 or 3 projects. So when that first group of learning is getting ready to do something else, then they have a choice of 2 or 3 different projects to work from. So they can resonate with one. They'll have to do them all at some point, but if they really get into one, that's good. And actually that helps the other students then see other ideas at the time too, so that they kind of can bounce off of each other, which is what I like them to do. And in my class, I want them to talk to each other. And my job is not to keep them at that class. My job is to get them where they're moving on, actually, that they're going to research things on their own and find things that they want to do. Now, there are educators who want the huddle, right? And I'm not saying that that's bad either, but but if that's for your own self, then that's something different. But like they kind of huddle the kids and they almost don't want them to move on or move forward on that level. So it's interesting. So this gets into everybody needs different types of people who teach or learners too. You know, to cookie cutter us all is not necessarily always the best thing either, I guess. That's and that's really impossible when you think about it. Just look at all of us here. We have different facial features, different color hair, different color eyes. We're all sitting in a slightly different environment and room. And I think it's really great that we had the maple syrup moment, because that's something that when that happens, like in a classroom, like something comes up, to allow the time to go with it. Maybe not dwell on certain things that come up for other reasons, safety or other legal, I get that. But to have a maple syrup come up in the class, could we add French toast to that?
I think we can definitely bring French toast into this equation, which is a personal favorite of mine. I would actually take French toast over the pancake.
Yeah.
So
maple syrup is great to put into lemonade or homemade salad dressings. Okay, I diverge there from your comment there. Go ahead.
Oh, so you're putting syrup in the salad dressing. I thought you were putting French toast in your salad dressing, and I was
No,
gonna
no,
have to
no,
give
the
you
syrup is
pushback
good.
on that.
Instead of,
'Cause-
yeah, as a sweetener, maple syrup is like great, right?
Oh, this is good. Now you're making us hungry. Yeah.
Anyway,
So,
but you were
but
gonna say something, and we both kind of jumped in excited at the same time, so.
you also, I like your idea. I want to kind of tweak it and put a little heart next to it. This idea that you have of making yourself obsolete.
Wait. Oh, maybe we can find a different terminology.
No. I really like it. I really like it. And what you're doing is you're trying to, and it might be interesting to kind of tie this into the concept of choice. If there is a way of doing things, then my way is that right way. If there's a smorgasbord and a bunch of different ways that we can do things, and then we can also, as you said, you've got your students then bouncing ideas off of each other. And it's not so much the huddle, but this kind of hive of divergent activity. You're making yourself obsolete there. You don't need to maintain the reins, the control to wisdom and knowledge. You have created structures for them to build it themselves.
Hopefully, yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah.
No, I like the idea of trying to make yourself obsolete. It's a humble way we as educators can think about what we're doing, because we're not just, again, it's, you give the fish or you teach them to fish, or you teach them to stick the fish in the hole under the corn, whatever it is.
And then they have to go fish.
That's
And
right.
then they find out that the stream is lower than what the lure was, that and the bait that we told them was the best because the water's a little bit different, now, or higher.
And then they can stick a
there's
chunk of their French toast on the hook and
with maple syrup.
and that's gonna bring in the big old catfish.
Yeah, metaphorically, it's great. That's great. These are great. And then here's a couple quotes, and I'm not sure why I have these or where I heard it or if I wrote it from something. But I keep rewriting it because I'm not done with it. But, we all have to release ourselves from the burden of perfection. And perseverance does not require perfection. So, and then for all of us, projection is perception or vice versa. Perception is projection. And, we all do it. We all have our places. And if you want to call them vulnerabilities or stuck or humanness, since we don't maybe care for the word vulnerability as much as maybe some other looking for our strengths instead of weaknesses, because it seems often places like to look for weaknesses rather than the strengths in businesses and administrations to employees, etc. So if we can find a way to build each other up, and I guess that's something also I've attempted to do with teachers. They're so micromanaged, and like we've talked before, they need to get out and they need to be able to be human and show the things they love, like maple syrup and the carbon cycle and whatever it is. And it doesn't need to be the same thing for everybody. Although I'm going to come and learn from the maple syrup learning. Yeah, I'm going to show up at your shed.
Yeah, we all want to take a field trip to the Sugar Shack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
I do though. I do like the I think there is something that is, if we just focus on the strengths, I think we end up missing the opportunity for noticing where I have the biggest opportunities for growth. And so it's not, so by saying we want to kind of look at what our strengths are, we're not just saying, we're not saying ignore that other stuff, but I think that reframing instead of like, what's your weakness, right? You know, the reframing it as your growth edge, that
Yeah.
like in the name of that thing is growth.
Growth edge, yeah. So if we need to reterm it in our own history and society and learning, so that it's a more strengthening tool rather than a shame or embarrassing tool. You know,
It's it is the place where the biggest opportunities are lurking.
yeah, it's kind of like if somebody cries, they're considered weak. Well, I personally, that can be a strength. How amazing that they can be that deep in feeling, and allowing, and especially if it's about something current rather than something from the past that hasn't been let go. Perhaps you know, I don't know. I don't know that. That's things, you know. So I just know a little.
This is cool. Let's bring the I noticed from your facial or body language, I think Sarah, you've got something to add to that. And
Yeah.
then I also want to bring in the doodler on this. So let's first jump over to Sarah, and then we're going to also get a dose of doodler here. So Sarah and Eleni.
Sorry, I know I've got a really expressive face. I didn't mean to be pulling.
No. It was subtle. It was subtle, but this is something that Avea taught me to do. Avea said, look at people's body languages and expressions, and you can see when somebody kind of has an idea that, and you want to make space for that idea. So that's something that I learned from Avea. She's doing that all the time, constantly looking at people's micro expressions to, so just sending a shout out to Avea right now. Looking at the micro expressions to see kind of where that is. So what does that make you think about?
Oh, well, just as you guys were talking about, you know, growth, which is obviously so important. And I loved what you were saying, Marcia, about, you know, making it so that our students are confident in themselves to go and do connecting with nature without us there, because we can't always be there with them. So that's like the ultimate goal, is for them to be independently connecting with nature. I think just kind of thinking about vulnerable people of all ages. I know for me, when I've been going through a difficult time and somebody wants to like set me a challenge, I think, no, I've got enough challenge going on right now. So I think there's this balance to be struck, isn't there, between helping people grow, but without doing it on hard mode, which is this thing that I keep coming back to that's like helping me loads. I don't know if any of you guys play computer games, but apparently when you play computer games, you can set the difficulty level. So you're playing your computer game and then you get to a bit that you just can't like fight this baddie or get over a big bit, complicated puzzle or something. You can just go into the settings and lower the difficulty down to easy mode and get through that bit. And then you can put it back up again when you feel comfortable. And I keep kind of thinking about that with my own life and my own practice. Like, if there's something that I want to try, but I'm not feeling 100% comfortable about it, can you just, you know, do it on easy mode? Like, growth doesn't have to come from challenge and adversity. And like, we've all got enough, we're all doing enough growing from that. it can come from really gentle challenge as well. It can come from like, yeah, just real gentleness, and it can
play.
be like a,
You're-
yeah,
you're,
exactly.
you're saying
Yeah,
back off the stress and go play a little bit.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, sorry, that's you've articulated what I was trying to say. I think sometimes, I know for me, and I think a lot in our culture, we kind of have this idea that we have to just be working really hard and we have to just strive all the time. And growth doesn't necessarily have to come from being in that state of mind. And I'm just really conscious that I don't want to put that on people that might be vulnerable in a way that I don't appreciate.
Yeah, that is wise. That is wise. Like that it doesn't have to be like facing down the world. You can back off, you can play, because when you are in that mindset, that more sort of playful state, the more relaxed brain, you're in a place where it might be easier for other creative solutions then to come.
Yeah, and that idea of like challenge kind of brings up ideas of competition as well, doesn't it? Rather than community. And then you start comparing, oh, they're doing better at this thing than me. So and so's always better than me. I'm rubbish. I
You
should
got the
be
high
here.
score.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop now.
Oh, this is good. So now you've even got more to work with, Eleni.
Well, I think Sarah said it all. I mean, I was thinking about and I mean that sincerely, not just as a sort of verbal segue. I had this experience last week in my class. So I'm teaching this class that's called Drawing, Painting, and Collage for Everyone. How's that for like the biggest bucket you can figure out?
Everything for everyone.
And there's nature journaling. So so I had this astonishing experience as a teacher. There's a student in my class who has the ability, she just looks at something, she can immediately replicate it, depict it as if it's a photograph. So speak about vulnerability, I just want to crawl in a hole and die. But how wonderful is that? So then she looks at then we do this sort of, we put all the stuff on the floor, we do a little go around. And she looks at my piece, and she doesn't necessarily know it's my piece because people don't have to sign anything. And she said, I want to be able to do that. And then I said, and I want to be able to do that. And this was already like the 6th class. So it wasn't like the 1st class, the teacher says you can't draw, which isn't true, but it would sound that way. So to Sarah's point, I said to her, I said, why don't you just do what you love? Like, love what you love. Like, do you enjoy drawing? Do you enjoy, how did I phrase it? Like, do you enjoy having it come easily to you that you can look at something and then just depict it? She said, yeah, I do get a lot. I do enjoy it, but I want to do that other thing. I said, well, you can do that other thing also, but how about love what you love? And then when you feel like it, really, to Sarah's point, it's not like there's a race, and you're allowed to have 2 different bodies of work or 3 or 4 different approaches. You can have throw stuff down and see what happens. And then you can have like this really intense focus. And then you can have a mashup. And I think that's the greatest gift to get. And, in our little group, we were talking about it with Marsha Lynn and Laura, that, for those of us that aren't in a school setting where you have deliverables and you've got to like have mastery and you've got these checklists, that's a different world. Then I really respect that folks need to have a different, sort of operating system. But for those of us who teach in continuing ed or, outside of certain kind of settings where you have to accomplish something, you can really lean into what Sarah's talking about. I mean, let's just chill out a bit. Just you know, and if you want to take a break, I actually tell my students, class is an hour and a half, you know, but you want to take a break, go take a walk, go outside, take a walk, get a cup of coffee, bring it back in. If you spill it on your work, that'll be an opportunity. You've got brown ink now to draw with. Anyway, that's a little bit of what came up for me, that we can honor people's strengths and invite them not to consider themselves stuck, because that's what astonished me about one of my students. She felt stuck. It's like, that's all I know how to do. And it's like, okay, then try something else and see. Anyway, you get the idea.
And just
Yeah.
sort of the relaxed, when we make it complicated, it's complicated, and you just made it simple. And you said, okay, and this too, and
Yeah.
that there's not one way you're supposed to fit this in, and it can be kind of messy, and you can wear different hats at different times and different vibes. Sort of reminds me of Whitman, saying, you know, I am large, I contain multitudes,
Right.
right? So give yourself permission to contain multitudes, and to approach all sorts of things in different ways. And sometimes you're challenging yourself, and sometimes you're playing to your strengths, and
Yeah.
sometimes you're out on a limb, and sometimes you're in that little hole in the trunk, and it's all safe in there, right?
And maybe that's what we want our students to develop, is the discernment, to develop discernment. What do I, as a creative person right now, or however you define yourself, you know, what do I need to depict something that I know how to depict because it's going to calm me down. And then I might then want to move into this thing that I don't really know how to do, but I'll be chilled out enough to sort of give it a go, something like that. And this student, I keep coming back to her because she's just so amazing. It was like she was also responding to everyone else's expectations. It's like, oh, so and so, you're so good at that, and she's really good. And I did talk to her one-on-one outside of just the class. I said, you know, it can be very seductive to be so good, and then everybody just wants you to keep repeating what you're good at. So it's your job to discern, like, okay, I can do that. But I think I'd like to try this other thing. And because I'd like to see what happens if I fail, you know, and then I'm going to really learn something. And that's going to be exciting. And her eyes lit up. It's like, yes, I want to do that.
Oh, what? And what a wonderful opportunity to offer somebody.
Yeah. Let's make a mess. Let's make a big mess.
And that I wrote down the term discernment, and I really, that it's okay to be all over the place. It's also helpful just to be reflective enough to be aware of where you are.
Yeah.
And that those other things are different things. And if it's all just a blur to you, then there's just anxiety. But be able to have the discernment to see those as different ways, different energy, and it's all okay. And I have the permission to engage in all of those different energies at different times.
Yeah.
But you've got the discernment to sort of back up at a higher elevation, sort of, and see the form of that landscape.
Yeah, you're kind of stepping back and you're saying, oh, I really like making stuff that people like. That makes me feel good. But you know what? I don't really need that today. So I'm going to like go over here and do this other thing. Or maybe I want to, yeah. And it's counterintuitive because it's so familiar in these settings that we are looking for the external validation. And that's a wonderful thing. We want to be in community, but we also want to like let people just kind of be themselves and recognize themselves.
What a wonderful moment in that class.
Yes,
those are some, like, one of the things that, you know, as teachers, the more that we can sort of be aware of when those moments come before us, that really motivates us to to stay in this. I'm so glad that both that you had that experience and that you're that you can remember that and share it and carry that with you. That's the
Oh,
sort
I'm gonna learn from that. I mean, I'm still not done learning from that. There is so much in there. Yeah, thank you, Jack. We'll figure it out together just by, as it comes up in conversation,
Do you keep a personal journal of thoughts and ideas?
Well, what I do, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but after my class, I do a write-up just for myself of like what happened. And I always send an email to the students that's just the broadest summary. We did this and then that. So it's sort of like they have a snapshot of the experience. And then my notes are much more detailed. So I'll have a note, so and so, this thing happened, and then I might weave it in.
Great way to reflect.
It helps me sort of not lose those things. I mean, because they're gems. For me as a teacher, facilitator, they're just gems for me to remember that,
I'm wondering in this conversation about using the word expedition or explore for trying something new. And because of course, I'm thinking if I said it's okay to fail in a high school class, I might have a few parents writing notes or phone calls or something.
Absolutely.
Because it's so many things just get taken out of context. So here's this whole semantics thing that, again, discernment. So I was like, let's explore. It's okay to explore the tools. It's okay to try this. Go on an expedition of art techniques or, something like that. So again, we can, it does matter. And it's a sensitive issue. So, and I know we could go on, but I also, Jack, see Jim and Ivea. So why don't you pop me out of here?
Okay.
Just into
Thank
the
you for
gallery.
your wisdom and perspective. It is so I'm going to pop out right there. And I'm going to bring Jim in and Avea in. Jim, oops, sorry, I brought Star in by accident there.
You can pop me out too.
Okay. And all right, so hold on a second. We're gonna do a little bit of musical chairs here for just a moment here. And so Jim, great to see you again.
Okay, yeah, it's great to be here. I did have a comment, but I also wanted to chime in on what Eleni was just saying, and Marcia, that it reminds me of I do watercolor, I paint, and in order, I'm so often disappointed in the paintings that I do, that I as formal paintings. But if I take some lousy paper and just decide I'm just going to throw something together, the results are so much better. Just like I've learned so much more about art through nature journaling because it takes the pressure off. So this idea,
have you ever had a piece of paper that was such good paper that you couldn't touch it?
Use it.
Yeah.
I probably have a few that I've never used. Yeah. I find it helps to have adequate paper. Sometimes I will do a sketch and someone will see it in the sketchbook and they'll be like, oh, that's our daughter's bat mitzvah. Could we have that? And I'm like, sure, why not? How much do you want for it? Get me some paper, buy me a pad of paper and we're square. So yeah, some way to take the pressure off with students, but I'm not sure what that would be. But the thing that, and this may be a little off topic, and maybe I know Aveo had something she wanted to say before. So if this is going too far, maybe we shouldn't, but I have I'm a real egalitarian at heart. And the teaching I do mostly, the steady gig I have is with middle and high school kids. And my impulse is to treat them as equals. But especially after the last session on feedback, I'm wondering about that because I'm also a very sarcastic, I have a kind of an offbeat personality, and it seems to be working. No one's left the class in tears yet, but I'm thinking of one kid last year who was, I felt he had a great amount of potential, but, and this is just art, this is not nature journaling. He would, normally just start out, do something interesting, and 5 minutes later come back and it's just a black, or, he just destroy whatever he's doing. He definitely had personality issues. They were having trouble with him in the school. But I remember one piece that he did, and I'm trying to praise him for it. It was pretty abstract, and I'm like, dude, this is genius. This is fabulous what you've done, and you don't realize it. And I just don't know if I was getting through to him, And of course, the fact that, with my personality, I don't know. It may have been going the wrong way, It was really hard to tell with this kid. But I was wondering how people feel about that, about treating the students as equals, or do you try and maintain a little hierarchy there? And of course, I don't literally treat them as equals. I am the teacher, I'm in charge, I maintain order, but on some level, I'm always looking at them as just like, on the same plane.
At the end of the day, we're just as much on the same plane as we're not on the same plane. And I think that it is okay even to be inconsistent in our application. Sometimes you just want to, I think you want to think of like, what is in the best interest of this student in their growth at this time? Is it to be in a sort of a mentor-mentee relationship with you? Is it better for them to be in a sort of peer relationship with you? I don't think we don't want to pretend that we don't have the expertise that we have, because then that brings sort of a sense of insincerity into our relationship. But also, in the moment with that student, what we do is we do the best we can at that moment. And I don't think we need to then turn around and second guess ourselves and say, this, I think that the pressure on us as teachers is really, really large, and it is real, and it is hard to be a teacher, and it's hard to be a good teacher. And the more we practice this, we can second guess all these different moves we make. But I think just give ourselves the permission to do the best we can with what we have at the time. And by doing that, we are giving the students something that is really useful. And so, if you're thinking like, if only I'd said the right thing, then that kid would have stayed in this. Yeah, maybe, or maybe not. And it's okay.
Okay.
But as Star would have us pay close attention to that kid, and you are, so you want to really see them. So it all starts with paying attention, and then we're going to do the best we can. What's your sense on it, Avea?
I was trying to think about, sometimes I don't always like when we say our treat the students as equals or not, and I'm trying to figure out how that looks. What I'll try to do is sort of get into my student's head a little, but not in the weird way, more like in the way where I can see from their perspective, so that I can try to figure out sort of where they're coming from, what they're thinking, what they're looking for. And that can sometimes be hard. Sometimes people will be coming from a place or a perspective that I don't know very well, or that is hard for me to understand, which is why I'll try to clarify where they're coming from. And I don't know that and so for me, if I'm trying to see through their eyes, then isn't that a way of, like, it feels as though it's sort of like being an equal because you're actually trying to sort of imagine being them, if that makes any sense.
And you're also talking about, trying to understand their perspective, as you really kind of helped us think about in our last meeting. Something that's really important is we can ask.
Exactly.
Right. And who was it who was talking in the previous workshop about the idea of, and this might be particularly appropriate with these students who have vulnerabilities, is the idea of asking for permission to give the feedback. And is this, what kind of feedback is going to be the most useful to, and a lot of students won't know. But in our feedback discussion, there's a lot of interesting talk about not assuming that we know what they need.
That's a good point. Asking and saying, listening to the student speak and then saying, are you wanting feedback? Are you wanting more just to be heard right now and to know that I'm listening? And then asking a question that way. And then if they say yes to feedback, then you can say something to the effect of, what kind would be helpful? Or you could name a certain kind. Would this kind be helpful? Are you looking for help figuring out like more of the process? Or are you trying to help adjust your mindset? Are those things that are helpful to you, or are you looking for something else? And it might take a little while to ask those questions and to figure out how to formulate them. But if you approach with the spirit of, I want to be here for you, then that usually helps give things a bit more direction. Because then your student knows that you're not trying to just assume, you're genuinely trying to figure out how to be there.
I like that thought.
I was really liking earlier on what Sarah and Eleni were saying about noticing when a student might need things to be a bit more on easy mode because the rest of life is on hard mode, and then also looking for students loving what they love. Earlier on, I'd been thinking about, we were talking earlier about letting people with certain strengths shine. And I was thinking that's a great way to make students feel very seen if they have that strength and they shine. And then that we can not necessarily feel bad about our vulnerabilities if we ourselves don't have that strength. But then a thing I worry about is that if you're a student who hasn't gotten a chance to shine with your strengths, but other students have, then would that hurt somebody's self-esteem? And I was wondering about that. And then I was wondering how to make sure we're seeing each student's strengths, but then also worrying about not making it a thing of competition, and instead making it a thing of community, like how Sarah was saying. And so I was thinking that sometimes it's not always about looking for the strengths. It's maybe about, like Eleni said, looking for what your student loves and just helping them really experience that joy. And so then that could be a way of celebrating something that isn't necessarily about always exploring the vulnerabilities, but instead still, though, letting a student who might be feeling vulnerable or shy to come forward in a different way. So I really like having that option of looking for what the student loves too. I found that really helpful. Because then as the student finds the thing that they love, in time, if it seems appropriate, then you can help the students look for areas of growth if they'd like. But maybe if you can't, if it's difficult to start with strengths, or if you get a student who thinks they have no strengths, which can be really hard because you might be able to see a strength that you
Mhm.
believe in with them, but they might not be in a place to hear it. Then instead helping them open up about what they love, because then that could be the thing that drives them when they leave your class. In addition to, Laramie had a really, really good idea earlier on in the chat about giving activities after the class in case your students wanted to explore vulnerabilities on their own where they have the privacy to do so. And so there's that. You can give them those opportunities. And then also by helping them access their joy, to give them those opportunities to continue seeking out that joy if you can make it more in their hands. And like Marcia was saying, make yourself obsolete more. So joy's a very powerful motivator as well. Just more.
And then to tie one other thought into that, when you're talking about like what do you love, or even thinking about what your strengths are and these sorts of things, underneath all that is that you have to develop the ability to discern. That's where discernment comes in again. What those things are. If everything is and if you feel in the middle of all this sort of stuff, stressed and under pressure, you don't have the space to be able to figure that out. So I like this idea of making this flexible kind of Eleni space where you've got you've got these different parts of yourself that you can bring out, or I think Marcia was talking about having different projects kind of going on simultaneously, where there is this choice. All of those can help us deal with our vulnerabilities. There's a bunch of really interesting topics, a bunch of really interesting thoughts that have been threads through this conversation. What I encourage people to do is that, I don't know if you keep notes as we do these things, but I find it's a very useful thing to do. And if you did, what I'm going to suggest we do is when this workshop closes, to open those up and see if you can circle a few parts of that and draw lines between them, and then sort of pay attention to what those lines are. What are the threads of connections that are tying some of these ideas together? There's some really, really rich ideas. If we go away from this and just make a sandwich, a bunch of that's going to get forgotten. If we, like Ebbinghaus would want us to do, sit down and just sort of give ourselves a little refresher, kind of play with it, look at these notes again, try to find some relationships between these. I think we're going to be able to turn ourselves into the ability to even more articulately play with these ideas.
I'm going to make this an official phrase. Let's Ebbinghaus this business.
Let's Ebbinghaus out of it. Yeah, that's all right. So we encourage everybody, Ebbinghaus in the house, and let's see what we can do with this. Oh, but for folks who aren't familiar with our buddy Ebbinghaus, he's the person who came up with the idea of these sort of, just sort of short periodic reviews where you kind of reflect and kind of connect. You pull this sort of stuff again, you remind yourself of the things you're thinking about, and that really helps things kind of get into your long-term memory. A really useful tool for learning. And with that, it is time to go make French toast. And I actually am going to go make French toast. I'm going to go make French toast. I've been thinking about it for an hour now, and I have earned French toast today. And so, my dear friends, have you. I would like to thank Avea for helping wrangle the conversations and keeping track of everybody's micro expressions, ideas, things coming up in the chat. We're grateful to everybody's participation today. This was a really, really rich discussion. I find I look forward to Wednesdays so much so that I can be in here with you and these just wonderful ideas. And thank you all. until we meet again, let's pay attention. Let's do our best. And we're going to see what comes of these wonderful, wonderful threads of ideas. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jack.